NBT Nation, it is great to see everyone out there today. Welcome to a Sunday morning pop up live. I normally like to schedule these out ahead of time. I'm going to be scheduling more live NBT lives throughout the course of this year, but I've got a topic that I wanted to tackle, so we're going to dive in and do it live. I hope everybody is having a great Sunday morning here on out in NBT Nation. You want your corporate training to achieve results. You want your corporate training to move the business forwards. You want that investment in training to produce results on revenue, profit, talent retention, customer satisfaction, those top line metrics that keep you up at night. What's a great way to do that? Well, that's what we're going to unpack today, my friends. Teach systems, not information. Teach systems, not just mountains and mountains of raw information. And this is something that I had to figure out as a certified no boring trainer, and I want to pass along to you in BT Nation so that you too can be certified no boring trainers, and you can that investment, that time, energy, and passion you pour into corporate training, or if you're a leader, that time and money you pour into your training, you want to get results. So whether you're a trainer or a leader, today we're going to unpack. Teach systems, not information. We're going to dive into that right now. If you're out there in NBT Nation following along, drop me a chat. Let me know where you're at. Let me know if you're what part of the world you might be in right now. And let me know, have you ever sat through a horrible, awful, miserable, boring corporate training? If so, let me know. Leave me a chat. You might be in the next edition of NBT Reacts. Haven't done one of those in a while. Might have to do that here soon. Teach systems, not information. And here's what I mean by that, NBT Nation. There are a lot of benefits that come from teaching repeatable systems, repeatable processes, repeatable approaches, as opposed to just a mountain of information. So I'll give you a quick example of the power of teaching a system, and then we'll dive into what are all the advantages, why would you do all this? So, quick example. In days gone by, don't do it so much anymore, did a lot of sales focused training. I teach a lot of other topics now, but have done a lot of sales-based training. And there's 1,000 different sales systems out there. There's spin, there's conceptual selling, there's challenger sales, Sandler sales, all of these approaches, really, really great approaches to training. What I've done in the past is break all of that information down into repeatable bites that make it way more interesting and way more effective to learn the information. All of those systems I mentioned, all really great sales approaches, all really great. They too break their systems down into repeatable parts. And in fact, they're sales systems. That's what they are, right? So what I did was took a combination of the parts of those different systems that made sense for that particular organization, put them in a logical order, and broke that down into 3 pieces. It's this, this, and this. And I don't want to say what the thises are, just out of respect to that organization, but instead of, here is how you prospect, here's how you do a discovery call, here's how you qualify that call, here's how you overcome this objection, here's how you ask this versus that, here's the stages of the sales pipeline. We taught all of those things, and we taught all of the pieces of these different systems that made sense for that organization. But we boiled it all down into a simple 3-step system. This, and this. And the results we got from that were amazing, because now all of a sudden you can organize the information into the respective buckets. You can wrap your head around it. You can coach on it. You can hold people accountable to it. You can teach it. You can replicate it out in the field, all of these different things, right? All by boiling everything down into a system. So when I say teach systems, not information, that's what I'm talking about. Now, of course, as you teach the different parts of the system, of course, you share information along the way. I'm not saying you don't. I'm not saying you don't teach specific pieces of information to learn how to do a medical procedure, or if you're doing some sort of analysis thing and you're teaching that, of course, you're going to have to share some information, of course. But the more you focus around teaching a system, the better it will be. And here's why. We're going to break all of this down. So now we've defined what I mean. Let's break down what the advantages are. All right. Number one, why do you teach systems as opposed to raw information? Number one, it assumes that there's a system and a procedure in place to begin with. As we like to say often here at NBT Nation and often here on the channel, you can't teach what isn't defined. If you're doing safety training and you're teaching near misses and you can't define what counts as a near miss, how on earth can you expect people to learn how to report near misses? I mean, it's not complicated, right? If you're teaching how to fill out Form 7253 and you want to boil that down into like an easy system or a mnemonic or a mind trick or an acronym so that you can teach that as opposed to 52 repeatable steps, that's great. But that assumes you have a system to fill out Form 5273. And in fact, Form 5273 exists. If you want people to load the truck this way, because this way is safer, and you're going to teach them the system of loading the truck, that assumes you know as an organization what is the safest way to load that truck. So just some different examples. This applies to everything. When you teach, we as trainers teach systems to help organize the information and learn it better and make it more interesting, and some of the other advantages that I'll talk about in a minute. When we teach that, it assumes from the beginning that those things exist. That's why I recommend, as a certified no boring trainer, teach systems. As you put those together, you're not responsible for creating the system. I use the example of loading a truck. You're not responsible to go figure out how to load the truck safely, but you know what you can do as a corporate trainer? You can go to the people who load the truck and ask them, how do you load the truck safely? And then you can go to your environmental health and safety people and say, hey, how do you load the truck safely? And then you can go to the field level supervisors and four people. How do you load the truck safely? And then you can go to the OSHA website and you can Google. You go to OSHA website and get information from them. You can Google, how do you load a truck safely? You as the trainer can be fostering this understanding if it doesn't already exist. So there's a benefit to the organization by teaching systems, not just raw information. Now, you can certainly do a program or a session, how do you load the truck safely, and just share all sorts of information about all of the different components and pieces and steps of loading a truck safely. But I'm telling you, when you boil that down into a repeatable system, you're going to get way better results. And the first point I'm trying to make here is that it backflows up into the organization. You as the trainer are not responsible to figure out how to load the truck safety, but you can certainly prompt the organization to figure it out, document it, structure it, so you can go teach it. So number one, teaching systems, not information. It assumes that your organization has the systems, has the processes, has the procedures in place. And if not, you as the trainer can gently go create the environment where that can happen. Number two, why do we teach systems and not just heaps and heaps of information like we're a bunch of college professors and we just, here's all this random information with no real structure, no real context, no real pieces or order. Here's why we do that. Here's point number two. When you start teaching systems and processes and procedures, it litmus tests that those systems, processes, and procedures work. Let me tell you, after many, many years of corporate training, nothing will unravel a ill-defined system or an ill-defined process as quickly as teaching it to the frontline workers. Again, as trainers, we are not responsible for that system, that process, that procedure, but nothing is going to point out the flaws quite like the frontline team saying, yeah, but what if? Yeah, but if I do this, then it conflicts with that. Oh, I can't unplug this piece of the machinery because while I'm doing that, somebody else is coming underneath me to unplug this other thing. And now we have a conflict. Oh, yeah, well, I can't fill out this form because I don't have the information to fill out the form because that person over there doesn't ever give me the information, doesn't have the information. The system doesn't give it to us. The software doesn't work, whatever. Nothing highlights a broken system or process quite like teaching it to people. Now, it's always uncomfortable, us as the certified no boring trainer, because we're now in front of the room saying, hey, this is what the company recommends. And then somebody points out something legitimate. That gets awkward. It also assumes that we, as certified no boring trainers, know the system and process. As we like to say here, interesting and effective training starts by being real, relatable, and relevant. And if you, as a corporate trainer, haven't gone in and dug in to really learn this system that you're now teaching and saying, hey, wait a minute, before I teach this, I want to actually go out and see this in motion. Maybe I want to even do it myself. Maybe I want to go do some shadowing or some field experience so I can in turn teach the thing. That will also reveal breaks in the system, breaks in the process. You, as the trainer, should go out and learn this stuff. But at the end of the day, point number 2, nothing reveals the issues with a system or a process quite like teaching it to the frontline users. They will point out the issues very, very quickly. And that's a good thing. That's what you want as an organization. It's free. It's free process refinement. It's free continuous improvement. It's free consulting work. So you want that. So teach the system, teach the process. It will check that those systems that hopefully already exist actually work, actually are effective. So, all right, that's point number 2 here in BT Nation on a random Sunday pop-up live. All right. Third reason why I recommend certified no boring trainers teach systems as opposed to just mountains of random unconnected information is it breaks your programs into logical pieces. It breaks your programs into logical pieces. If you know systems of the organization, and frankly, you know how the organization fits together, and you know how this department fits with this department, fits with that department, and you know how this system for this department that you're teaching needs this information from this department for their system to work. And now you're teaching this system, but you got to understand this organization. Guess what? Now you can start to line up all your programs. I'll give you a practical example. I do a lot of leadership training, and I've broken it down generically into manager level training, leadership oriented training, and culture or organizational level training. Manager, leader, culture. Those pieces all fit together. It's a very high level description. It's a little bit more involved than that in real life. Manager, leader, culture. And when you put all those pieces together, now you have an effective leadership program. And I can teach the systems of just being a day-to-day manager for a respective team, department, company, organization, whatever, because I've broken that off. Now, there are certainly levels of leadership that I sneak in there. There's certainly pieces of culture that I sneak in there. But because I've broken this out as 3 parts of a leadership system, now I can really dial in the type of program I'm teaching. I can dial in the content. I can dial in the outcome I'm trying to achieve. I can dial in the audience. I can dial in all of the different things. all because I've organized this into a leadership development system as opposed to here's just a mountain of information. Because there's a lot of crossover in that information. As a manager, you got to be a good leader. But as a leader, you have to understand the day to day management. And none of it works if you don't understand the culture of that organization. And I can take that system and apply it to really any company out there because every company has managers. Hopefully, they want real leaders, and hopefully, they got culture. That's not always true, but we'll see. But by breaking it down into that system, now I can organize all of the respective pieces. So think about systems more than just raw information. Systems, instead of raw information, helps you align your programs throughout the organization. Think about maybe you're doing a technical product of some sort, and you have a marketing component, you have a sales component, and you have a product or tech support type component. Again, when you think about how all of those pieces fit together as an organization, you can now break them into a system to teach it to new hires. So when you hire in a new salesperson, you could start to break down the steps of the processes in a logical way so that they understand how these three departments fit together so they can go out and be a more effective salesperson. You can do the same thing for the marketing people and the product people that in their respective programs. So teach systems, not information. That helps you break down your programs. There's a couple quick examples for you. Number 4, teaching systems, not information, allows you to organize the session itself in a far more logical way. You're going to get way more interest level, way more participation, way more recall, way more action, way more retention after the fact by breaking your session down into a logical piece. Now, of course, we start with a session objective. We have key takeaways that drive us towards that objective. I mean, this ain't real hard stuff, right? But if you teach the system inside that umbrella, people have they have the ability to put the information into context of in terms of their daily job. They know how this thing that they're hearing about, how does this pertain to me in my job role? Because let's be honest, that's what they care about, right? What's in it for me? Why am I sitting here? I'm away from my desk. My emails are piling up. My Teams chats are going off. I have so much work I need to be done. Adam, why am I sitting here for the next hour? What's in it for me? How's this going to benefit me? Well, if you teach a system, not only is it easier for them to learn, you can put this in the context of their daily lives. Little creator juice there. I'll give you an example. I teach some interviewing skills workshops. Have a system. When you're interviewing people, you want to look for fit, facts, and feels. Fit, facts, and feels. How does that candidate fit with your organization? What facts do they provide you in terms of their skills and character? And what is your sense? What is your gut feel of how this individual is not only going to fit with the organization, they're going to fit with your team, and more importantly, add to your team. They're going to elevate your team. Fit, facts, and feels. It's a really simple system. It's a really simple framework around which the learner can learn. And now your session gets far more organized, far more relatable. There's far more context. Staying on the interviewing theme, when you think about, sourcing, screening, and selecting, which is pretty vanilla HRE interviewing stuff. You source, you screen, you select. Again, a system around which you can teach and which you can organize your training delivery. You can have individual sessions for each one of those points, sourcing, screening, selecting. You could talk about, you could break down each session into how you deal with fits, facts, and feels. And now all of a sudden you've got context, you've got a structure around which people can learn. It makes it far more interesting. The ability or using systems also lets you dial in how you do the interactive pieces of your session. Frankly, it applies to programs, but certainly your sessions as well. Everybody always says, well, how do we make it more interesting? How do we do hands on? How do we do activities? How do we do all of the engagement pieces? Well, you build it around the parts of your systems. So if we stay with the interviewing example, fits, facts, and feel, when you're talking about how do you get the candidate to provide you facts of their skills and character, well, guess what? Now you're going to do a role play and they're going to interview you. And that's where you get the interaction piece. Have them interview you. You're the candidate. And what questions do they ask to prompt you to discuss your skills and your character? And then do they follow up and do they dive in and do they ask clarifying questions and do they pull on the thread? Do they hear the verb? Do they actively listen and hear the verbal cues? All of those things. That's just using interviewing as an example. I think back to my days in the hot dip galvanizing world. You'd go to a steel fabricator, and it didn't take long to figure out that if you started asking about what jobs do you have coming up, what bids do you have out on the street, what projects are you chasing, now all of a sudden they would now instead of just saying, "Hey, I'm from the galvanizer, and can I have some of your business?" You were starting to get a sense of what was coming down the pike. And then when you were talking to the architects who were actually choosing and specifying, and you had to teach them how the hot dip galvanizing process worked, guess what? You could break that down into a system too. Here is the how you quote, or here's how you calculate the pricing of what the corrosion protection system would be. Here's the processes that you need to go through to prepare your steel to be able to be galvanized. And here's how you crop the corner of the gusset. And here's how you put a weep hole into your tubular structures so we don't have explosions. And here's how you put lifting lugs on that could easily be knocked off afterward. All these things, when you're teaching them, can all be broken down into systems. So teach systems. Fits, facts, and feels. It's super rememberable. It's sticky. People can latch onto that. That's just some goofy little thing I made up. It's not some, uh, uh, proprietary IP sort of thing. It's just a simple way for people to remember the information, wrap their head around the information. That way you can then teach the information. Now you know where to put your engagement pieces. And now you know, lastly, what to test on. So when you start teaching systems, guess what? Now you can start to measure people's knowledge a lot more effectively. And that's going to be the last point for today's Pop-Up Live. Why do we teach systems, not just raw information? When you teach raw information, here's just all this stuff. And then you do a test immediately at the end of the session, you are measuring their short-term memory. And that's great. That's fine. That's better than nothing. But it's really not measuring impact on the business. What is going to get you impact on the business is, do they know and understand the system so that they can go out and replicate it later on? Another big reason for teaching systems, processes, procedures, things like that, instead of just mountains of raw information, is that now you know what to measure. You can have them performing the systems, processes, and procedures during the sessions and programs. That makes it far more interesting to learn. You can have them performing the systems processes, procedures as part of their graduation. You're learning each step of your system as you go throughout the training session or program. You're learning each step along the way. You're doing lots of hands-on activities, lots of games, lots of experiential learning, lots of breakout sessions, a lot of group discussions, a lot of graded homework, a lot of role plays, a lot of demonstrations, a lot of simulations for each step along the way. Then you get to the end of the program, and guess what? You got to put all the different steps of the system together and then now perform it all in real life. And you can now start to measure each step of the way. You can measure it as you teach each step individually. Do they know step 1? Yep, A plus. Do they know step 2? Yep, A plus. Do they know step 3? A minus. Do they know step 4? B plus. Do they know step 5? B minus. And now you can start to track the progression of learning. Did they get a B minus in that 5th step because they just are like they're getting to their end of their ability? Or did we do a crappy job teaching it? Or maybe the curriculum wasn't dialed in as well as it needed to be. Maybe the test wasn't so good. But you can now start to test each step of this process because you're teaching the process. You can test, or you can measure when you teach the system. You can measure it at each step as you teach it, and you can measure it, them putting it all together. Can they perform the thing that you just taught them? Can they put it all together in real life and do it, or in a simulated real life? Again, a long time ago, I used to teach a lot of sales stuff. And over the course of many weeks of learning all these individual pieces of the system, the graduating exercise was you had to actually conduct a real life sales visit. And I tried to make it as realistic and authentic as I possibly could. And that was sort of like the graduation exercise. And they would either be able to do it or not do it. Now, of course, I'm giving you the high level detail here. We did lots of little build up pieces to that. But the other reason why you want to teach systems is it allows you to then measure better. Are they retaining the information, and can they apply the information? And this gets back to my point at the beginning of this little piece. If you just teach a bunch of information and then 30 minutes later at the end of the session test them on whether they remember the information, you're just testing short-term memory. But if you teach a system and their ability to apply the information, it's much deeper. It's embedded in their brain far more deeply. They have a much deeper and richer level of understanding. And the odds of them then going out in the field and applying this information go way up because you're measuring that they can actually apply it. And they've got a system that's easy to remember and easy to repeat. And guess what you then can do? That goes to the next advantage of teaching systems. Now your field level managers can evaluate them on whether they can actually do the systems, procedures, processes, whatever you want to call it. They can measure it once they get out of training. And now your field level managers can give feedback to your training groups to say, hey, they're killing it. They're crushing it. They're doing great. Or your field level managers can say, no, something's off track here, either with an entire group, a candidate, whatever. If you teach people how to apply systems instead of just remember raw information, now you can do long-term performance development of your teams. How cool would that be? Long-term performance development tied to the strategic goals of the organization. Again, you want training to impact top-line revenue, profit, customer satisfaction, retention of your talent, all of those things, right? Well, if you start teaching systems to your various departments that are then repeatable out in the field, now that can start to flow in your performance reviews your performance development, your compensation reviews, all of those sorts of things. All because you were teaching systems, processes, procedures, as opposed to just here's a mountain of raw information. Can you remember it for 35 minutes until I test you at the end? Way better results. So systems, not information. And now, again, obviously, as you teach a system, a process or procedure, you're going to have to share a lot of information along the way. But hopefully, through the course of this NBT Live, you're getting the sense of what I'm talking about. We're we're not just teaching. Here's a bunch of facts and figures. We're teaching repeatable systems and processes that are specific to people's job roles. And if we go back over what are the advantages of doing this? Well, number one, it assumes you have those systems and processes in place to begin with. Advantage there, right? It's a litmus test of whether those systems, processes, and procedures actually work. Nothing reveals a shortfall in a system quite like teaching it to frontline users. So it assumes you have your systems in place. It is a systems check as you teach it to the next crop of people. It gives you the ability to align your programs to match the systems of the organization. And it helps you to break your programs down into far more logical pieces. Gave you some examples of that. It helps you to remember the context, or it helps you to organize your sessions, rather. Good Lord. It helps you to organize your sessions because you're breaking your sessions down into logical pieces. And then when you break your sessions down into logical pieces, you're going to see a huge increase in the retention of information and, more importantly, the ability to apply the information because you're taking that session and you're breaking the pieces down into relevant context. You have a better opportunity of knowing where to apply your engagement pieces, the hands-on activities, demonstrations, role plays, whatever. It gives you the ability to measure those pieces of your systems far more effectively, and it helps you drive towards applying the information, not just recalling the information. So teaching systems as opposed to just information. It's a different way of thinking about things, and not every little thing can be broken down into a system. Here's how you badge in the morning. Okay, put that together in a 3 bullet point email, do a 30-second explainer video, hit send on the email, be done with it. That doesn't need some fancy system with an acronym and a process. Swipe the card, be done with it. Some things need to be done in a more live environment where you do the training in a classroom type setting or an e-learning setting or a virtual setting, but then you have to follow it up with or field training and structured shadowing afterwards. Now, you should still have a system in place when they go to do the shadowing. That system in the field better match the system you taught them. Otherwise, if they do something different in the field, all that training time goes out the window. That's a different topic for a different NBT Live. But that training might be happening in the classroom piece, and then you follow it up with some structured shadowing afterwards. That information that gets shared at the shadowing piece may not make sense to share over here during the classroom piece. I'll give you some quick examples when we do the live on this later on. But the point I'm trying to make is that there are times where we do have to just share information, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you teach as a corporate trainer, as a certified, no boring trainer, think about how do I teach systems instead of just raw information. It's going to help you organize your programs. It's going to backflow up into the organization to make sure that what you're teaching is actually real. It's going to help you to take your programs and break them down into more effective sessions. It's going to help you take your sessions and break that down into more effective learning. Teach systems, not just raw information. Here you go, NBT Nation. What do you think? Leave me a message in the chat feed. Do you teach systems? How do you use systems to help influence how you structure your training programs? Where do you see the breakdown in teaching systems versus information? There's a time and a place for both. How do you organize the information that you teach into various systems? When we talk about systems, it could be as something as simple as an acronym that you then teach and you organize information around, or it could be big picture. How do you organize the overall training for a big, complicated organization? Give me some, give me some thoughts, NBT Nation. Leave me some messages in the chat feed. I hope everybody's having a great Sunday morning. If you haven't gotten your copy of The Hard Truths to Becoming a No Boring Trainer, 60 pages, 20 hard truths, 15 infographics, and tons of information. If you're new to corporate training, if you've just pivoted over from education or you're just starting out, you're maybe an established trainer in a small company and you don't have a real robust training team. It's just you and you're overwhelmed and you want to level up your training. Or if you're the leader of an organization and you're not getting the results you want from your training investments, the hard truths of becoming a no boring trainer is available now for less than the price of a cup of coffee. You can get your PDF download now. Thanks, NBT Nation. Hopefully you're having a great Sunday, whatever part of the world you're in. And I hope